dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Men Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Men Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Men Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Men
Stanley
Thinkin.
Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC Talk 107.5 in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, let's get right to it. To me, there's a fishy smell kind of arising from all that happened in Charlottesville. And, of course, the fish was alive last weekend or whenever that protest was going on. But you know what? When something was rotten from the beginning, the further you get away from it time-wise, the more it starts to smell. And it's starting to stink pretty bad. Charlottesville's starting to smell real bad. Let's start with, well, there's several things. And when you look at them all individually, they don't indicate nothing. The problem is, when things start coming together a certain way, it does make you wonder. And all things in Charlottesville are starting to point to something really strange going on, primarily from the political left. Let's start with Jason Kessler, who was the organizer of the rally Unite the Right in Charlottesville, where we had the violence and the young woman, Heather Heyer, I believe her name was struck and killed by a car, a vehicle driven by one of the alt-right protesters. And, of course, that starts a firestorm, and now we've had everything going on with President Trump making his statements, which, I'm sorry, they were accurate, but, you know, people don't want to hear accuracy that much anymore. They want to have their feelings validated. But Jason Kessler, interesting guy, he's holding a rally. Now, he's a relative newcomer to the white nationalist scene, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, but he's made waves by an attempt to unseat Charlottesville's only black city councilman, and for his status as a bridge between a Virginia gubernatorial candidate and the alt-right. That's interesting. There was also another rally that he organized back in May for the alt-right. They had torches and they had some of the same things you saw during the last rally. It got national headlines, and not surprisingly, if something works and is good one time, then maybe you can do the sequel and get even more attention and support for your cause, at least politically. That's the way things work. Understand that. The thing that is difficult to understand is that Jason Kessler was an Obama supporter. And there's plenty of evidence to believe that that support continued up until the election in 2016. Could be. You also have his participation, and it may not have been as an organizer, it may have simply have been as a protester in the Occupy Wall Street. Please explain me what Occupy Wall Street and the alt-right or white nationalists, what do they have in common besides Jason Kessler, by the way? Does that seem a little bit odd to you? It definitely seems odd to me. So that's one element. What about paid protesters? Well, why are you bringing up paid protesters? Well, Zero Hedge came up with this. Why was this crowd hire company recruiting $25 an hour political activists in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is the state directly to the south of Virginia? Why were they doing that the week before the protests? Trump ignited a political firestorm during an impromptu press conference in which he said there was blame on both sides for the tragic events that occurred in Charlottesville. Now, the discovery of a Craigslist ad posted almost a full week before the protest is raising new questions over whether paid protesters were sourced by a Los Angeles-based public relations firm specializing in innovative events to serve as agitators in counter-protests. Here's what they saw. The ad reads as follows. Crowds on Demand, a LA-based public relations firm specializing in innovative events, is looking for enthusiastic actors and photographers in the Charlotte, North Carolina area to participate in our events. Our events include everything from rallies to protests to corporate PR stunts to celebrity scenes. The biggest qualification is enthusiasm, a can-do spirit. Pay will vary by event, but typically is $25 an hour plus reimbursements for gas, parking, Uber, public transit. Well, that doesn't mean anything. You're right. However, we've seen this movie before. Washington Times reported back in 2015, hired protesters with the Black Lives Matter movement have started a Cut the Check hashtag and held sit-in at the offices for the successor group to Acorn in Missouri after that group allegedly stopped paying them. Let's not forget that the people who came to Charlottesville were out-of-towners. The protesters were not from there. The same could be said about Ferguson, and that was said during the first riots. These people are not from around here. Front Page Magazine reports that Missourians organizing for reform and empowerment have been paying protesters $5,000 a month to demonstrate in Ferguson. Last week, hired protesters who haven't been paid held a sit-in and posted a demand letter online. Wow. Oh, does it stop there? No, not really. The Hill from April of 2015, Maryland Democrat Elijah Cummings, he's a Maryland Democrat, alleged Sunday that many rioters in Baltimore the previous day were from out of town, noting that he was amid crowds in the area. So he was there, and he's saying the protesters here, they're not from here. That was dealing with the Freddie Gray thing. So let me get this straight. You're placing ads in the next state over a week before the protest in Charlottesville. You got people who protested in Ferguson sitting in and demanding their $5,000 a month check from the successor group to Acorn for their protesting in Ferguson, and Elijah Cummings is out there in the streets during the protest looking around and comes to the conclusion that the people who are protesting aren't from the area. And we know good and well that the alt-right was not busing anybody in to Ferguson, to Baltimore. Given Jason Kessler's involvement in the Unite the Right rally, I can't say with the same level of confidence that there was no busing in of right-wing individuals into Charlottesville. If anything, I would have to entertain the possibility that, you know what, we may have brought some clowns in from both sides to hold that circus. How do you feel about that? I know how I do. Here's something else that I find extremely, extremely disturbing about that whole incident. Where were the police? Where were they? Because one of the criticisms from everybody there at Charlottesville is that the police did not do enough to keep violence from breaking out. So the obvious question is, well, where were you? As Charlottesville began, this is from CNN of all places, as Charlottesville began to heal after this weekend's violence, many are wondering how things got so quickly out of hand. Alt-right and white nationalist rally-goers are pointing fingers at the counter-protesters who showed up to denounce them. The anti-racist protesters say Unite the Right rally participants were yelling racial epithets and provoking confrontation. But both sides agree that one group didn't do enough to prevent the violence as the crowds grew and tensions flared, and that group was the police. Critics say both Charlottesville police and Virginia State Police stood on the sideline Saturday as skirmishes erupted between white nationalists and members of Antifa. It wasn't until police declared the rally an unlawful assembly and Governor Terry McAuliffe declared a state of emergency that police ordered the gathering to break up and scattered the crowds throughout the city. Wow. Here's what Charlottesville PD had to say during a press conference regarding what had happened in the city that weekend.
And do you wish you would have come more prepared, so to speak? In other words, you knew what was coming. You met with them, you had a plan, you talked it out. Do you regret not having your officers better prepared and in their proper gear earlier so they could have acted sooner?
Absolutely, I have regrets. We lost 3 lives this weekend. I certainly have regrets. We lost 3 lives this weekend, a local citizen and 2 fellow officers. We certainly have regrets. It was a tragic, tragic weekend.
Your department, do you regret your action and your decisions that day?
I explained what our regrets are. We regret this tragic day. We regret that we had a tragic outcome and we lost lives.
Man, you want to talk about deflecting. Remember what the reporter asked him. You met with them. You knew what was coming. So are you looking back and saying you should have been better prepared? And like the true politician, which a police officer is not necessarily supposed to be, he answered the question not asked. Have we seen this before? Does anybody remember these priceless and classic words from the mayor of Baltimore after their riots?
20 yards this evening. Like, did you have a sense that they might try to go that way?
Well, we've had these types of conversations before, and I've made it very clear that I worked with the police and instructed them to do everything that they could to make sure that the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. And we worked very hard to keep that balance and to put ourselves in the best position to de-escalate. And that's what you saw this evening.
That was the special person known as Stephanie Rawlings Blake, then mayor of Baltimore, during those rallies. The delicate balance of protecting the rioters from cars and other things while allowing them space to destroy. Fascinating. And before that, we heard from the mayor of Ferguson back in 2014.
I would like to make this statement perfectly clear. We would like to thank the many police officers, firefighters, and Missouri Highway Patrol troopers for putting themselves in harm's way to protect our citizens and our businesses. Unfortunately, as the unrest grew and further assistance was needed, the National Guard was not deployed in enough time to save all of our businesses. The decision to delay the deployment of the National Guard is deeply concerning. We are asking that the governor make available and deploy all necessary resources to prevent the further destruction of property and the preservation of life in the city of Ferguson. It was my understanding that when we asked to make sure that the National Guard or additional assets would be deployed, that they would be held in reserve until a time in which they were needed. Clearly, last night they were needed much earlier than what time they were deployed. It was my understanding that they would be deployed if needed to maintain order and protect businesses. They were not. So that was my concern, not so much with the availability, but rather the deployment. My understanding was they were available, they just were not deployed. Last night, when we did ask for them to be deployed, there were many elected officials in the region, statewide and others, who did help us try to reach out to the governor, as well as the Attorney General. And eventually, those troops were deployed, unfortunately, too late.
So here is the recurring theme. It's not that police, law enforcement, government resources to protect were not available. The consistent complaint is they didn't do what you would expect them to do in highly volatile situations. The National Guard was ready to protect, but they were never deployed to do so in Ferguson. In Baltimore, the police were ready to protect their city, but they were told to stand down, a move that the sheriff in that area said made him sick to his stomach. And in Virginia and Charlottesville, the ACLU and reporters covering the Unite the Right rally, they say the violence escalated due to what many believe was an intentional lack of police oversight, with the blame aimed squarely at Democrat Governor Terry McAuliffe. Here's a quote from WND. It says, "The police actually allowed us to square off against each other," one counter-protester told CNN. "There were fights and the police were standing a block away from the entire area. It's almost as if they wanted us to fight each other." Full stop. They do. They did. In Ferguson, in Baltimore, and in Charlotte. And guess what? We're just getting warmed up. What is my conclusion from this? Charlottesville was a setup from the get-up. You go out and get an Occupy Wall Street guy and put him on the side of the alt-right and organize a rally, and we're just going to keep seeing how far we can go until we can get this thing going. Let's go up and call in some protesters from the outside like we've done before in two other places where we had some serious throwdowns going on. And now, by the way, let's make sure we get the folks on the government side all in good with us so they know not to turn loose the police to stop what we want to see occur, because they want the violence. It was said in Ferguson, well, why the looting? Well, without no looting, you don't get attention. Well, if the police had stopped that, then I guess you wouldn't have had the looting. If without the looting, you don't have attention. Guys, you're being set up. They are trying to take the country apart by removing every semblance of law and order in big ways, in small ways. But this is not random. This is not total chaos. It is a systematic effort to bring about chaos. And if you're not ready to fight this with something more than indignant words, you better get ready, because Antifa has already made it clear that they're not trying to hear what anyone has to say anymore. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the new dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Continuing on the theme of this first hour, we're going to talk a little about Antifa, their commitment to violence, and statues. First up, you have to understand who and what Antifa is. Antifa stands for anti-fascist. And, of course, not everybody knows what a fascist is, so we need to define that. A fascist is defined as a follower of a political philosophy characterized by authoritarian views and a strong central government, and no tolerance for opposing views. Now, that's actually what was begun in Italy under Mussolini. That's what it was. And Hitler did not precede Mussolini. He followed him, and he picked up this particular ideology and turned it into National Socialism, which is also, of course, known as Nazi. That is what it is. Now, of course, this is supposedly something that you associate with Donald Trump. Authoritarian views, Donald Trump. Okay, I don't know what that means. Strong central government, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is actually trying to get power out of D.C. and back to the states. He's actually trying to, quote unquote, drain the swamp of establishment politicians who basically continue to pile power into Washington so that they can ignore the will of the voters. He's working to go in the opposite direction. So I don't understand the strong central government thing. That's not Trump. No tolerance for opposing views. People oppose Donald Trump all the time. He doesn't try to shut them down. He just calls them out. You shoot at Trump, he shoots back. He doesn't try to keep you from speaking. And if you don't want to get tweeted on, don't say nothing that he doesn't like. But if you do, expect to hear from him. If that bothers you, that doesn't make him wrong. That makes you a little bit on the sensitive side. But I digress. So to attach the fascist label to Trump doesn't make any sense. But the interesting thing about this is once you understand who the anti-fascists or the Antifa are, you might really have an epiphany about these people. CNN did a surprisingly good piece, of course this is biased, it is CNN, exposing Antifa, particularly their increased penchant for violence of late.
Welcome back to The Lead, the National Lead now. By most accounts, almost all of the people protesting against the hateful bigots, the Nazis and Klansmen in Charlottesville, were peaceful, but not all of them. In their midst was a sometimes very violent group of protesters that call themselves Antifa, known to not only clash with bigots, but also sometimes with police and occasionally storefronts. At least 2 journalists in Virginia were assaulted by violent counter-protesters over the weekend, including this cameraman from the Richmond CBS affiliate. CNN's Sarah Gannon now takes us inside Antifa and shows us this group like you've never seen it before.
It's 6 a.m. in Portland, Oregon, and we're headed to a bar with blacked out windows.
They wanted to meet us really early in the morning because they're concerned about a lot of people being around.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage, hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting.
You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way, and you have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
There's no firm number on how many Antifa activists there are in the U.S. because there isn't any one organization. Most are local groups that recruit and communicate through social media. But experts who track these organizations, national groups, and the election of President Donald Trump. Violence and property destruction led to more than 200 arrests in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. Prosecutors say they were wearing masks covered head to toe in black, a tactic the Antifa call Black Bloc.
People dress in Black Bloc for a few things. One,
Scott Crow has been leading anarchist and militant leftist groups for decades.
So people put on the masks so that we can all become anonymous. And then therefore we are able to move more freely and do what we need to do, whether it is illegal or not.
So some people will push back on that and say that the Black Bloc is to keep people from being identified and arrested when they break the law, when they commit crimes.
Damn right. It's a good way to avoid the ramifications of law enforcement.
We saw that firsthand at a May Day protest in New York City.
We cover our face because the Nazis will try to find out who we are. And that is a very bad thing because they harass people. When they organize, they kill people, they hurt people, they fight people. And we're the ones who are fighting back. They are the second coming of Hitler.
Police in Berkeley told us they haven't seen this kind of destruction since the 1960s. Law enforcement in other cities are dealing with similar situations, like in Portland, Oregon, where Antifa have been involved in at least 10 protests ending in violence, according to police. And it's wearing on the community.
It is new. It's like this rumble mentality of, I'm going to bring my friends, you bring your friends, and we're going to fight it out in the park. It's not something we've seen here. It's not good for the city. People are just frustrated by it. It's affecting their livability. It's affecting their business.
Has it become more violent?
It happens quicker. The fire starting that we saw on May Day is something we haven't really seen much of in the past. The running through the street, breaking windows and everything in sight. We haven't seen it as consistently as we've seen it in the last 8 months.
But it's the violence that's gotten them attention, directly confronting groups that preach white nationalist rhetoric, like on Inauguration Day, when white nationalist Richard Spencer was punched in the face. And it was the Antifa movement that caused Berkeley to cancel speeches by extreme right provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos.
If there are the more hardcore elements, the white supremacists and neo-Nazis that go to these rallies that are itching for a fight, we're there to say, we'll stand in your way.
The thing is, Jake, that experts who I've talked to say that the Antifa violence may end up actually hurting their cause. Across the country, people who are dressing in black bloc are getting arrested. Authorities are taking this seriously, but that's not stopping them at all. They have been telling me that they believe that this tactic is working. Now, one of the interesting things that I found in doing this reporting, what's really surprised me, is that we found that a lot of these new Antifa members, they're young people, disenfranchised young people who felt that they were let down by both parties after the election. And this is where they ended up.
This is where they ended up. Wow. Let's remember that these are people who don't want to be exposed, but make it their mission to expose people with whom they disagree. They don't want to be known as, they want to be Antifa, but they want to dress up in black, hide their faces, and not be identified. But they want to look at everybody who's on the other side and make sure that they are identified as what they dislike. That's interesting. So again, you are what you oppose. You talk about violence, but the violence, there was no white violence. There was no white nationalists and alt-right violence in Berkeley when Milo Yiannopoulos or Ann Coulter went to speak. That all came at the hand of anti-fascists who were not being opposed by anybody except for somebody who wanted to speak into a microphone. This is Antifa. But you don't think they're the problem. And Donald Trump was wrong to call them out as the problem or one of the problems. Well, let's talk a little bit about the statues. I'm going to we'll bring it back. We'll tie it in a little bit. Because now what we have, not necessarily full-on part of the anti-fascist movement, but taking on the tactics of another very brutal organization, violent organization. What we want to do now is target physical history in the United States. We're going to tear the racist statues down. That's the headline from a story in RT.com. Activists target Confederate monuments across the U.S. Why? Who the heck cares? Well, I care. Really? You think you do? Okay. The justification for this is, well, it offends somebody. And my ancestor, if I hear another Negro come up with this my ancestor nonsense, your ancestor was not a slave. Your father was not a slave. Your grandfather, your grandfather was more than likely not a slave. Slavery ended 150 plus years ago. The majority of people in America never owned slaves. Only 6% of the U.S. ever owned slaves. So this whole thing, well, they're celebrating the Confederacy. What's it to you? It hasn't stopped you from getting anything that you've gotten so far. That statue did not come down. The guy on the horse did not come riding in the night and steal your degree. He did not come in and tear up your house. He didn't wreck your car. He didn't harm your children. He stayed where they put him because he's a statue. But you got to understand, if I'm offended, it must come down. Really? According to the polls that have been taken and have been cited by 538.com, I think they were taken by NPR and PBS. I love the way 538 puts it. Lots of Americans aren't sure if we should take down Confederate statues. What the poll actually said was 62% said don't. 62% of respondents to an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist University poll conducted after the violence in Charlottesville said that statues honoring leaders of the Confederacy should remain standing as historical symbols rather than be removed. You know what the interesting one to me was, though? Daily Caller reported on that same polling in this way. Most black Americans don't want Confederate statues removed. That was another finding of the Marist poll. 44% of African Americans believe the statues should stay in place. 11% said they're unsure. The remaining 40% said the statues should be removed. So you got more black Americans who say that the statue shouldn't go anywhere. 11% don't know one way or the other. Translation, don't give a rat's behind. You don't have a consensus for doing anything with these statues, is what I'm trying to get across to you. And the real interesting thing is, if you want to remove these statues, if you want to remove the physical history of a country, you are not acting any different than ISIS. National Geographic, September 2015. Here are the ancient sites ISIS has damaged and destroyed. The Syrian city of Palmyra. They went in and attacked archaeological sites with bulldozers and explosives. They took its history and blew it apart, plowed it under. They did the same thing in Iraq. They went into a place with 2,000-year-old shrines. And remember, this is a lot like, to be honest with you, a lot like what's going on with these folks who want to take stuff down. They went into Mosul, which is, I'm sorry, another place in Iraq, just like these folks want to go into different places in the U.S. and tear stuff up, and they want to vandalize another place of historical and cultural significance. This is what Islamic conquest does. They take over a place and they remove the physical history. Interesting. You know what else is interesting? It's the reaction of elected officials to what is clearly a minority view with regard to these statues. Now, Mitch Landrieu in New Orleans gave a very impassioned and eloquent speech on the wrong side of the electorate. Remember, 62%. That's a landslide. 62% of Americans polled said you ought to leave them alone. I don't think that changed because Mitch Landrieu got in front of a microphone. The way this works is government leaders, particularly Democrat-elected government leaders, get together to find the minority view, particularly if it means that somebody's feelings are getting hurt, and they listen to that and they talk amongst each other and they come up with words and plans and deeds that they defend. You know that Baltimore, without talking to anybody, went out in the middle of the night and took down statues. They did the same thing in Alabama. And this is how the current mayor of Baltimore defended her dark of night removal of Confederate statues.
City charter says that if the mayor, according to our city attorney, if the mayor wants to protect or feels she needs to protect the public and keep her community safe, she has the right to keep her community safe. And I felt that the best way to remove the monuments was to remove them overnight. I can tell you that I read the report. We set up a study when the nine adults were killed in South Carolina in 2015, when this became a big issue around the country where people started removing monuments. We set up a study, not me, the previous administration in 2015 set up a study. The study was reported out in January of 2015. I think there was a written copy produced in August of 2015 that suggested that the monuments should be moved, at least 2 of them. It also said that a process should be taken where there would be focus on how they would be removed and the time period in which they should be, and that we should ask the Maryland Trust for one particular statue. But I can tell you that having read the report and seeing what's going on around the country and the sentiments that have been expressed. And if anybody has not heard Mayor Landrieu's speech in 2017 when he removed the 4 monuments in New Orleans, I suggest that you do so. And I thought that there's enough grandstanding, enough speeches being made, get it done. I spoke with the council on Monday morning. I spoke with the president of the city council. I said, with the climate of this nation, that I think it's very important that we move quickly and quietly. I also submitted that to the entire body of the city council and said, we're going to be moving quickly, quietly to get this done. And so that's what I did.
She cites something that happened before she was in office. There is no call for those things to come down. She took no public action, and she hid behind a lie saying, well, if I feel like to do this to protect the community, who was asking you to do this to protect the community? You did it because you wanted to. You wanted to. They did the same thing in Birmingham, Alabama, but interestingly enough, they're fighting back in Alabama. That's the way things go. The Alabama Attorney General's office filed a lawsuit against the city of Birmingham for hiding a Confederate monument in Lynn Park on Wednesday. A crew erected plywood walls around a 52-foot-tall obelisk that honors Confederate sailors and soldiers after a violent white supremacist rally defending a Confederate monument in Charlottesville turned deadly over the weekend. The butthurt people decide to hide stuff and remove stuff. Fortunately, there are Americans who basically say, you know what, you need to toughen up, Buttercup, and we're going to sue you about it. Let me break this thing down for you. This whole statute thing is a minority action. The majority of the public is against it, period. You don't see this happening in too many cities not run by Democrats. It's a minority action designed to kill historical context, and it's being done in the style of Islamic conquest. Now, how long do you think it's going to be before those who oppose the removal of Confederate statues are lumped in with white nationalists, white supremacists, racists, bigots, Nazis, and the rest, and therefore become fair game for the black cloud and masked Antifa people to come out and do violence against them in support of removing these statues? That's how this all kind of wraps back in together. Antifa acts like Mussolini and Hitler while accusing others of being Mussolini and Hitler. And they channel their inner ISIS so that they can basically disrupt the nation to deploy and employ some failed and demented ideology. But they got you convinced that the alt-right is the problem, when the evidence of the alt-right's doing anything is limited to one incident within the last 2 weeks. You need to take stock of what's going on and stop allowing false moral equivalence to wrap up with your emotion and bring you to a conclusion that the facts do not support. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us, also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, I'm going to talk now about something that just demonstrates to me something I've already understood. Some of you may remember the words that were attributed and spoken, to be quite blunt, by Admiral Bull Halsey during World War II, during the Pacific Campaign, when he said the only good Japanese was a dead Japanese of about 6 months. I would rephrase that for the current time, and I know some people, well, it was terribly racist. I said, I'm sorry, there was a war going on, and he was fighting people who had run a sneak attack on the United States, and they plunged us into a war. I really don't care what he had to say about them, as long as he defeated them, which they did. Fast forwarding from that, I would look at this and now say, you know what? And America is actually starting to come around to this over the last 8+ years. They've been making this a reality. The only good Democrat is a Democrat who was out of office at least 6 months. And I submit to you as further proof of that a young lady in Missouri, State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal. The Kansas City Star published an article on the 17th of August quoting what she had put into her Facebook account. I hope Trump is assassinated, Missouri lawmaker writes, and quickly regrets. A Democratic Missouri state senator from University City posted, then quickly deleted a comment on Facebook saying she hoped President Donald Trump would be assassinated. Stop right there. She is expressing the closet desires, if you want to call it that, of the majority of left-leaning black females in America. I don't care what anybody says. I want to see him dead. Yes, they do. Stop lying. They do. She just said it out loud. If you go into social media and find any black female who is left-leaning, you're not gonna last 2 posts before you see somebody saying that he should be dead. So all she's doing is reflecting, channeling what the majority of left-leaning black females think. But as a result of her comment, the U.S. Secret Service St. Louis field office is investigating, and both Senator Claire McCaskill and the chairman of the Missouri Democratic Party have called on her to resign. For her part, Chappelle-Nadal told the Kansas City Star that she posted the comment out of frustration with the trauma and despair the president is causing with his statements about the events in Charlottesville, Virginia. Wait a minute. What statements can he make that are causing trauma and despair? Oh, he's not saying what you want him to say and not buying into the rhetoric of a one-sided confrontation. And because he won't bend to that false narrative, there is trauma and... Really? Man, we need to turn some heat up under these snowflakes. This is ridiculous. The way I responded this morning was wrong, she told the Star. I'm frustrated. Did I mean that? Did I mean the statement? No. Really? So you go around, you make a habit of making written statements that you do not mean, and you are a legislator. Okay. Am I frustrated? Absolutely. The president is causing damage. He's causing hate. You are on drugs. She posted a comment on her personal Facebook page, which is not open to the public. Oh, that makes it better, of course. She said it was wrong for me to post that, and what she posted was she hopes Trump is assassinated. But I'm not going to shy away from the damage this president is causing. I'm sorry, they're not investigating the president. They're investigating you for threats against the president. Does anybody else see the problem here? And I got to ask this question. What is the difference between this Missouri state senator, and Maxine Waters? Except for a little age. Maybe there's a little bit less dementia on the side of the Missouri state senator. I will give Auntie Mad Max one bit of credit. She keeps talking about an unsupportable impeachment, except for the fact she just doesn't like somebody, and that to her is grounds for impeachment. But she hasn't necessarily called for him to be killed. If I remember correctly, she said something about something happening to a plane that he and the vice president were on, and that got her in a little bit of hot water. But then again, that's a whole nother discussion entirely. Going back to Miss Nadal here, Chappelle-Nadal, here's how she came out in an interview with regard to the statement that she made.
I do regret what I said, but I am not going to shy away from my anger. I refuse to.
Tonight, this Missouri state senator is making national headlines. What she said online about the president has the Secret Service involved and other politicians calling for her resignation. Good evening. I'm Steve Savard.
And I'm Courtney Bryant. This is the Facebook post that has angered so many people. State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal posted, quote, I hope Trump is assassinated.
News Force Matt Sesney tracked down the senator. Matt?
Yeah, Steve, she says she is sorry for this, but the fallout is heavy on State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal. The post on that personal Facebook page that is now getting a lot of attention. The post came late this morning. During a Facebook exchange, Maria Chappelle-Nadal wrote, I hope Trump is assassinated.
I posted something on my personal Facebook, and I should not have done that. And for that, I'm sorry for that. But I am not, as I said, going to shy away from what caused that anger at all. I'm not going to shy away from that.
Chappelle-Nadal says she is angry over President Trump's comments after the Charlottesville confrontation between white supremacists and counter-demonstrators. Chappelle-Nadal is no stranger to controversies. She's been outspoken on many issues. But this time, she agrees it went too far.
No, I don't want to see anyone assassinated, but he should not be president. He should be impeached.
Yet as she backpedals from the Facebook statement, it does have the attention of the Secret Service, who confirmed to News 4 they are now investigating. And it's possible the information could be passed on to the U.S. Attorney for prosecution.
I don't know. There are a couple of guys who are outside my house. I don't know. I don't do much, but legislate.
Really?
I don't know who they are.
Really? Unmarked cards and things like that?
I don't know what it is.
Not many others are laughing. There have been several calls this afternoon for Chappelle to resign from Congressman Lacey Clay to Senator Claire McCaskill and even the Missouri Democratic Party. See?
So, Matt, those calls are coming from members of her own party. What is she saying? What's her reaction to that?
Well, it's funny. I texted her about that this afternoon. It took only 10 minutes for her to call me back, and she said, quote, I am not going to resign for something for a mistake that I have owned up to. So she's being very, very defiant on it.
Do you think the pressure will continue to be put on her?
Oh, I think there'll be many more calls for her resignation, but I don't think she's going to give in.
And two things about that. There will be, and there has been, increasing pressure on her to resign. But let's not forget something. This is someone who all they do is legislate. She has no other skill set aside from feeding at the public trough. That's what she does. So, of course, this is her only meal ticket, which is sitting around and waiting for the opportunity to speak into a microphone, play around on Facebook, and cast an occasional vote. Who wants to give up that job? Because in these United States, once somebody gets elected, you got to do some real bad stuff, because the recidivism rate, as I call it, which is also the re-election rate, is pretty doggone high. So of course she doesn't want to resign. She knows she's probably not stupid. She knows that if she can weather the storm, she'll probably get reelected, and she can continue to get money for nothing. But who all is calling for her resignation? Numerous top Republicans, this is according to Fox 4 in Kansas City, numerous top Republicans and Democrats in Missouri have called upon. Notice how this is not in D.C. Of course, she's not a D.C. legislator. But numerous top Republicans and Democrats in Missouri have called upon Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal to step down. Among them, Missouri Senate Democrat leader Gina Walsh. Wow. Missouri Democrat Party Chairman Stephen Weber. Democrat U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill said, I condemn it regarding her statement. It's outrageous, and she should resign. Missouri's Republican Governor Eric Greitens and the state Republican Party also called for a resignation, but Chappelle-Nadal said she had no intention of doing so. I refuse to resign for exercising my First Amendment rights, even though what I said was wrong. Really? Then why do you want the President of the United States to be impeached? Because even if what he said was wrong, was he doing anything other than exercising his First Amendment rights? The Secret Service has released a statement saying it looks into all threats against the president, whether they be direct, implied, or comments in passing. Her apology, if you want to call it that, came at a news conference in Ferguson. She asked media outlets to not publish the location beforehand because she's received death threats since the poll. Wait a minute, you called for somebody else to be killed and you received death threats. Oh, really? How novel. She apologized to Missouri residents and her State House colleagues. She says she'll continue fighting for issues that are really, really important to me. What the heck does that mean? The only thing that's really, really important to her right now is that her job is maintained. That's not looking to be defensible at this point. That's not looking to be a good fight. The odds on that don't look good. When everybody in political power over you in the state says you need to go, and that's on both sides of the political party aisle. And I bring up a difference between this, another difference between this and Auntie Mad Max would be, this is not D.C. D.C. hates Trump. Missouri does not. And outside the Beltway, the Republican Party is a totally different beast than it is in Washington, D.C. The odds are that this woman will be pushed out of office are not low. They're not long odds. I can't say that it will happen, and I really don't have an opinion about whether or not it should because I don't live in the state of Missouri. But if this is what you can do on one side, because had somebody called for Barack Obama to have been assassinated and they were a state office holder, we heard people just making quote-unquote racist comments about him being forced to resign from non-elected posts. The double standard is right there. Well, this is a Democrat for you. And like I said, the only good Democrat is one that has been out of elected office for at least 6 months. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards, and after that we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Aristotle's law of identity clearly states that every person, place, or thing is clearly defined by what it is. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, when a farmer plants seeds, he doesn't just grab any seed without knowing specifically what type of seed he is sowing. The farmer understands that if he wants corn, he plants corn seeds, and that pumpkin seeds grow into pumpkins, just as apple seeds grow into apples. When God created the animals, he made kind after kind, such as cows, fish, horses, etc. Horses know what they are, and they carry out their lives as horses. The same holds true for both male and female humans. Both are equal but uniquely different. So when I read reports about human adults becoming confused about what they are and forcing that confusion upon little children, I am convinced this is part of a massive effort to undermine society by assisting others who are seeking to convince society to do away with traditional families consisting of father, mother, boy, and girl children, and perhaps the family dog, which has been a stable, reliable source of living and cohesively maintaining strong and stable societies. If America puts asunder what God put together, then America will unravel into utter destruction. I'm Ron Edwards.
Blowing away the myths and revealing the truth. You can continue to blow away the myths with Ron Edwards on Facebook, Twitter, and theronedwards.com. Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Men Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the tax lie cometh. What do I mean by that? Back on June the 20th, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan gave a major address on tax reform. And some of the things that were said are just fantastic to me. And I don't mean fantastic in necessarily a positive manner. Let me give you an example. Here's one snippet.
We will consolidate the existing 7 brackets into 3, double the standard deduction, and simplify things to the point that you can do your own taxes on the form the size of a postcard. This instead of a 1040 form. Wouldn't that be nice? This is within our reach. And finally, and most importantly, we will use the savings from eliminating these loopholes to lower tax rates. Let me say that again. We're going to cut taxes.
You know, whenever I hear somebody talk about using savings from eliminating loopholes and things of that nature, instead of simply saying we are going to reduce everybody's taxes. One thing I'll say about George Bush, when he ran in 2000, he made it clear, if you pay taxes, your tax bill will be lower. It's just that simple. He said, lower taxes for everybody who pays taxes. He delivered, for the most part, on that, with the help of Congress, obviously. And as a result, the United States of America pulled out of the recession that we were in at the end of the Clinton administration. People don't talk about that. But we're in a recession at the end of Bill Clinton's 8 years. And it took a tax cut, 2 of them actually, in 2001, again in 2003, to actually pull us out of that recession and give us 47 months of just straight job growth. I think the economy added 7.7 million jobs in about 47 months before the bottom fell out with the mortgage debacle. But that is what I want to hear when somebody says we're going to get tax reform. I don't want to hear about deductions. I want to hear that you're going to pay less in taxes. I could not, you know what, I'll say this. Cut my tax bill in half and I'll fill out a few extra forms for you if it means I'm going to keep my money. But if I'm going to pay the same amount of money that I pay now, just do it with less paperwork, you're not helping me. And if I'm a business person, you're not helping my business. But in that snippet there, well, we're going to lower tax rate. Wait a minute, we're going to use the savings to lower tax rates. So basically, you're not saying that you're going to tax us less. You're saying that you're going to move the stuff around. You're going to shuffle the deck chairs so that we feel like we're getting a better ride on the Titanic. Now, you'll notice he said that they were unified on this. But we've heard that before. And I think it was on health care.
We started this process not a few months ago. We started this process over a year ago. House Republicans assembled a health care task force with all the committees of jurisdiction and any House Republican who wanted to participate in that. Out of that came a consensus plan that we all ran on together. It looked a lot like the Price plan. The Price plan was considered the conservative gold standard at the time last year. Many conservatives co-sponsored that plan. That plan looks a lot like what we're working on right now. You have to remember when it comes to tax credits, people who do not get health insurance from their job are discriminated against right now in the tax code. Let me say that again. The current tax code discriminates against people who don't get health care at work. We want to end the discrimination in the tax code against people who don't get health care at work and equalize the tax treatment of health care so that everybody, regardless of whether you get health care at work or don't, has an opportunity to get a health care plan that's affordable for you. That is what we've always been working on. That's the plan we've always been looking at, and that is what we're working on with the administration. I feel at the end of the day, when we get everything done and right, we're going to be unified on this.
That was at the end of February of this year, and as you know, the very next month, what they were all unified on, they couldn't even get a vote on. They had to pull the bill because they were so unified that it couldn't pass. So when Paul Ryan tells me that they're unified on taxes, I've heard this before. It was not true before. But that does not deter the good Mr. Ryan. Here's another snippet from his June 20th speech with respect to the promise he's going to make with respect to tax reform. It's going to happen, so he says.
We are going to get this done in 2017. You know why we're going to get this done in 2017? Because we have to get this done in 2017. We cannot let this once-in-a-generation moment slip by. Yes, the defenders of the status quo, and there are many of them, they're counting on us to lose our nerve, to fall back, or to put this all fall together. But we will not wait for a path free of obstacles. Guess what? It doesn't exist. And we will not cast about for quick fixes and half measures. Transformational tax reform can be done, and we are moving ahead, full speed ahead. I promise you.
I promise you. We will get this done in 2017. Wow. A promise regarding legislation from the current Speaker of the House. You know what? Where have I heard that before? Oh, that was Paul Ryan on health care again.
Look, I would not bet against Mitch McConnell. He is very, very good at getting things done through the Senate, even with this razor-thin majority. I have every expectation that the Senate, I don't know what day, but I have every expectation the Senate will move this bill, and I assume this bill will have changes. You know why? Because we all made promises we would do that. Every Republican senator campaigned on repealing and replacing this law. Point two, the law is collapsing. 41% of counties in America now, you have only one plan to choose from. So you're seeing families get hit with another double-digit premium increase. You're seeing choices evaporating in much of America. Blue Cross Blue Shield just pulled out of Wisconsin last week. They pulled out of Missouri. They pulled out of Ohio. 94 out of 99 counties in Iowa next year are scheduled to have no plans left. This law is collapsing. It's in a tailspin. We have a duty and an obligation to step in front of that collapse and rescue the healthcare system for people who are in the individual market. So I believe that they'll get this done, and I believe they'll get it done because they said they would get it done.
So, because the Senate said they would get it done, we're confident. I believe it's going to happen. That, and what was it? I wouldn't bet against Mitch McConnell. Now, right after he says that, John McCain said this.
To the left, you got me twisted. You must not know about me. You must not know about me.
Exactly. While you were not betting against Mitch McConnell, John McCain was moving to the left and reminding you of who he was. And as a result, GOP health care reform, which they had promised for 7 years, didn't happen. because you didn't know what you thought you knew. Look, this is the same Paul Ryan that sold you down the river with the Omnibus bill back in the last administration. He is the same Speaker of the House that wouldn't go to the mat for budget this year, this April. He wouldn't fight for it. This is the same Speaker of the House who told you that they were going to be unified. They had had at least a year to work on health care reform, and after that year, and after the years that had come before it, when time came, you didn't even have a plan that could get a majority of your caucus to support it. But you want me to believe you on tax reform. You could not get a plan together that would help Mitch McConnell pull off keeping his razor-thin majority in line to vote against something they've said for 7 years they would do. But you want me to believe you on tax reform. Mr. Speaker, I applaud your words. I am really encouraged by your enthusiasm. I just don't give a daggone about your judgment. You don't deliver. Period. You do not deliver for the American people. You never have delivered for the American people. And all we know now is that when Paul Ryan is in the wheelhouse, the ship will not move in the direction that we were told we were going. You cave. At the end of the day, Paul Ryan's about as conservative as a telephone pole. He's not. He is the quintessential rhino. Now, that said, because it's politics, and because we're dealing with a unique person in the White House, there is the possibility. And Mitch McConnell, having his ears boxed soundly on health care, may find a way to pull things together a little bit more tightly on tax reform. All these things are possible, and you could get something. Is it going to be the nice rhetoric that Paul Ryan gave in that speech on June 20th? In a pig's eye. I don't believe it, even though it's possible. But the thing is, let's remember, Paul Ryan has a track record. He sells people out. He sells the electorate out. And every time he sells the electorate out, he is always moving to the left of the electorate. The same thing that John McCain told Mitch McConnell.
To the left, you got me to stand. You must not know about me. You must not know about me.
Well, but by this time we actually do know about you, Mr. Ryan. Donald Trump has an agenda. It included a wall on the southern border. His election, which included the campaign promise of building a wall, has worked to reduce illegal border crossings by more than half. I have seen reports that border crossings, illegal border crossings, are down as much as 70%. But Paul Ryan didn't fight for funding for the wall that Donald Trump campaigned on and won on. He wouldn't fight for the Omnibus bill. He gave Barack Obama everything he wanted. He didn't fight for Trump's objectives in the most recent budget negotiations. But now he wants, let's not forget, he could not push through his Obamacare light, because that's what it was. Rand Paul told the truth. But all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that he has finally found religion, that he is ready to put together a plan that actually works for the American people, take advantage of the simple fact of history. 4 times in the nation's history, it has cut income tax rates. Every time it has done that, it has blown the doors off of income tax revenue. It happened after World War I. It happened in the 1960s. It happened in the 1980s. It happened in the early 2000s. Every time. So instead of trying to pay for tax cuts, just cut the rates. And then open the coffers wide, because the money is coming. Maybe you don't forget in the 2008 campaign, Charlie Gibson, in a debate between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, asked the question about capital gains taxes, saying, when you lower the rates, we have seen that the revenues increase, and when you raise the rates, revenues decrease. If that's the case, why would you consider raising the rates if we're looking for money? And Barack Obama stuttered through an answer, mentioning some offhand thing about fairness, as though that has anything to do with taxes. You want to be fair? Tax everybody less. Period. Move on. I don't trust the guy. If you do, that's you. I can't. Because I've seen too much of what he seems to be. And he's never varied from what he seems to be. The tax lie cometh, and it's coming for you. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM in North Florida. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the North Korea situation. What North Korea situation? We had tests, we had threats, we had all manner of things going on, and in the past week to 10 days, I'm not hearing much from North Korea. Now, of course, there was a few hours ago, North Korea warning of a merciless nuclear strike. Well, I didn't say it was nuclear. A merciless strike on the U.S. ahead of the U.S. South Korea military drills, things we've been doing for years. And it's been warning that the U.S. is pouring gasoline on a fire. You know, the interesting thing about North Korea, they ain't busted a grape since the demilitarized zone has been established. They'll go back and forth with their family to the south, but by and large, they talk a lot, and they extort a lot, and they don't do much at all. Let me make sure I get this clear for you. Donald Trump went at the North Korean leader the same way he goes at people, and then all of a sudden, the long, rambling threats against the U.S. seem to stop. Let's go back to April for, kind of get some perspective. Even before we had all the missile testing, you heard this.
An ominous warning from North Korea to the San Diego-based USS Carl Vinson, threatening nuclear response if the U.S. dares to strike.
The USS Vincent and its group ordered to the Korean Peninsula over the weekend. 10 News reporter Emily Thode is live at the Embarcadero. And Emily, you talked to an expert about this threat.
Yeah, and you can understand that there's thousands of San Diegan families worried because they have loved ones on board those warships that are based here out of San Diego. I spoke with an expert who thinks North Korea's threat may have something to do with the U.S. strike on Syria. North Korea warning the United States it will respond to, quote, reckless acts of aggression with whatever methods the U.S. wants to take.
We're there for deterrence purposes.
Ron B. is a foreign affairs expert at the University of San Diego.
My take on it is that folks in North Korea saw what happened in Syria, and they're concerned that the Vincent may be coming to do the same sort of thing with its 2 missile carriers with it, and so they had to issue a warning.
The warning comes as 5,000 sailors, most based in San Diego, are on their way to the Korean Peninsula. They're part of a strike group of 4 warships and 60 aircraft, led by the USS Carl Vinson, escorted by missile-guided destroyers USS Wayne E. Meyer and the USS Michael Murphy, and the guided missile cruiser, the USS Lake Champlain.
We need to reassure our allies that we're there to help them should North Korea do anything silly.
B says North Korea may be planning to launch missiles, possibly nuclear, in a few days on April 15th, all in celebration of the birthday of leader Kim Jong-un's late grandfather, who led the country after the Korean War.
Remember, the missile test goes into the Sea of Japan, and they don't notify Japan when this happens. They don't notify South Korea when this happens. We happen to be allies of both of them.
Some experts believe that the USS Vincent and the other warships would be in a position to shoot down a missile. I'm live at the Embarcadero. Emily Thode, 10 News.
Thank you.
So they are threatening because they saw that Donald Trump actually is a president who will order military action. Even though that action in Syria did not really accomplish what many people might think it did, you have to remember they gave the Soviets fair warning to get their people out of harm's way, and then they bombed a relatively empty facility, rendering it incapable of doing much more to anyone else, but at the same time, not really destroying too much besides materiel. But North Korea took one thing from it. This guy is not Barack Obama. Barack Obama will not threaten us, and at the end of the day, Barack Obama will back down. He backed down for 8 years. You couldn't get Barack Obama to do anything other than launch drones at Muslims. That's what he did. So if you're not a Muslim and you don't challenge Barack Obama, then you know that you know what's going to happen. He's not going to do anything. But now we have a new guy in, and because he believes something which I will defend as loudly as long as I can, the Syrian government did not gas its own people. I don't care what you tell me. I've read too much. But that's not the issue. And I'm not sure whether or not Donald Trump really believes that the Syrian government, I'm not saying I am not on the White House staff. I'm not getting phone calls from Donald Trump. No, I wouldn't take them if I got them. But I'm not sure that Donald Trump believes that the Syrian government gassed its own people, no matter what anybody says. But I do believe he understands that a message of American resolve and power was needed. And as silly as it may seem, those missiles that were fired sent that message. North Korea got the message. And now they don't want the Carl Vinson group to show up in their waters, because they know what happened the last time the Carl Vinson showed up someplace. So they threaten the group while it's in San Diego. Yeah, okay. They weren't satisfied with that. A little bit later, as they ramped up all the missiles, you have to understand something about North Korea. North Korea does not historically threaten people in order to follow through with military action. They threaten people to basically get them to back away or to extort something from them. They've been doing that since the 1970s. And so and remember, our military has told us these guys don't have the weaponry. They don't have the technology. They do not have the capability to do most, if any, of what they threaten. And here's another thing that they threatened.
And a chilling new threat from North Korea, the rogue nation vowing to strike the heart of the U.S. This comes in response to CIA Director Mike Pompeo commenting on the country's leadership.
The regime, I'm hopeful we will find a way to separate that regime from this system.
North Korea's state news agency firing back, threatening to attack the U.S. with its, quote, powerful nuclear hammer, should the American Secret Service attempt to remove Kim Jong-un from power.
There is no powerful nuclear hammer in North Korea. If they had a powerful nuclear hammer and tried, they would simply be evaporated. Is that a comforting thought? No. But it's a less comforting thought to North Korea, who can't feed their people, whose economy is already on the brink of collapse and just got hit with sanctions by the UN to cut their revenues from international trade by a third. They're not interested in anything other than talking tough. Now, for those who actually think that simply because they fire a missile that they can actually hit something with it, well, back around the 8th of this month, they threatened Guam. Now, let me get this straight. You go from threatening a carrier group, then you threaten the U.S. homeland, then you back down to Guam. Why would you back down to Guam? Maybe because you really can't hit the homeland of the United States no matter what you say. And this is what the governor of Guam said in response to the threat, and this was an address he gave to the citizens of Guam, which are also United States citizens, by the way.
Good morning, my dear people of Guam. I know we woke up to the media reports of North Korea's talk of revenge on the United States and this so-called newfound technology that allows them to target Guam. I'm working with Homeland Security, the Rear Admiral, and the United States to ensure our safety. And I want to reassure the people of Guam that currently there is no threat to our island or the Marianas. I spoke to Joint Region Marianas Commander Rear Admiral Shoshana Chatfield, who has confirmed this with me. My Homeland Security advisor, who is in communications with Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, notes that there is no change in the threat level resulting from North Korea events. HSA George Charfus reminds us that there are several levels of defense, all strategically placed to protect our island and our nation. And additionally, I've reached out to the White House this morning. An attack or threat on Guam is a threat or attack on the United States. They have said that America will be defended. And I also want to remind the national media that Guam is American soil. And we have 200,000 Americans in Guam and the Marianas. We are not just a military installation. And with that said, I want to ensure that we are prepared for any eventuality. I will be convening the Unified Coordination Group, which includes myself and the Rear Admiral, and to discuss the state of readiness of our military and our local first responders. And my office will continue to provide information to our community. What information that we are given, we will pass on to you. May God bless the people of Guam, and may God bless America.
I wonder if you paid attention to his shot at the press, letting them know that, we're actually citizens here, not just some military outpost, but also that there was no change to the threat level as a result of North Korea events. Translation, we know they can't hit them. Translation, there never was a threat. There was a lot of movement, a lot of Brownian movement stuff going on that meant nothing. But the press, CNN and company, wanted to play it up. Why? because they don't like Trump. And if you make it seem as though North Korea is going to do something because Trump is president and it's going to get everybody in trouble, might get everybody killed, it just weakens Trump. But we already know North Korea is a bag of hot air. They do happen to have nuclear weapons, but they don't have a delivery system that is reliable. They are not they will blow up their own country before they blow up somebody else's. In response to all these threats on the carrier group Carl Vinson, threats against U.S. cities that they could not do, threats against Guam that they cannot carry out, Donald Trump on the 9th of August, I believe, sat with his arms crossed in front of him at a table and read the following statement.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is called calling a liar's bluff. Donald Trump is a genius. I'm not trying to say that because I particularly like the man or dislike the man, but I've seen him destroy a field of 16 valid GOP contenders for the nomination. I saw him manipulate the press in masterful fashion for an entire year and a half of a presidential campaign. I saw him win a campaign that nobody thought he could by actually appealing to the things that mattered to most of America. And since then, I have seen him decapitate the press, not their ability to report, but their ability to be believed and respected. They are paper tigers. They are just what you find from that passage in Macbeth. They are people telling tales told by an idiot, full of sound and wind, signifying nothing. Donald Trump knows people. He knows how to press certain buttons. And since he told North Korea fire and fury, and reiterated that the next day, I haven't heard anything about a threat to the homeland. Haven't heard anything about Guam. All I've heard is their normal threats whenever the U.S. has a joint action with South Korea. We're back to normal because Donald Trump called the bluff of a lying fool. I know that the press over here gets everybody in a tizzy, but let's be honest, you ain't cared about North Korea up to now. Don't act like you're all worked up over North Korea. They were a bigger threat when 44 was president. At this point, they know that Donald Trump has their number. He's hitting them with the same boisterous foolishness that they spit out, and they understand, oh, this guy knows who we are. Trump spoke up. North Korea backed down. Let's all move along because there's nothing more to see here. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force of internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also on WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 in North Florida, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. I want to see if we can draw the distinction between jumping ship and draining the swamp. Because what we're hearing about the Trump administration and the various carousels of people coming in, going out, and then there's other defections and business councils, and all this is being spun by the media to say that it is a weak administration, not accomplishing much, doesn't have the support that it should. You put that together with the polls that say that he is so unpopular. Now, let's just make sure we get this. Donald Trump is the most unpopular president in modern times, but every time that man holds a rally, it's standing room only. It was that way during the campaign. You could count on one hand the number of people who showed up to hear Hillary Clinton or to see Hillary Clinton. But you had people camping out to try to get in to see Donald Trump. And of course, that's a relevant statement. You know, she had a few hundred. They would actually rearrange how the people were in a particular venue so they could block off the section that was empty and make her campaign appearances look as though they were better attended than they were. This is what they would do in order to deal with the fact that the polling and the actuality didn't line up. And guess what? They still don't. Nobody likes Donald Trump. Then who are all these folks who keep showing up at these rallies? Donald Trump is a terrible guy. Nobody wants to work for him. Really? Okay, let's look at that one for a minute. Does anybody remember how many campaign managers that Donald Trump had? I remember Corey Lewandowski beginning, and then of course they sent the serial accuser, basically Michelle Fields, who has a history of accusing people of violating her. They sent her out there after Corey Lewandowski. And instead of Donald Trump allowing that to derail his campaign, he switched gears and brought in Paul Manafort. And he moved him to the next phase of his campaign because Corey Lewandowski, great guy, not a great political guy. He's not. That wasn't his field. Paul Manafort was a political guy. Well, that moved him into the next phase of the campaign. Then they came after Manafort. And then he switched over to Kellyanne Conway, who, along with Trump himself, brought the train in for a successful presidential campaign. The Trump train arrived successful, victorious. But you would have sworn whenever there was a change, it was that the campaign was falling apart. It's not well organized. They don't really know what they're doing. All these things, and they won. Donald Trump doesn't have enough money. He doesn't have a great ground game. He's really not doing this right. He doesn't understand what he's doing, but he won. He won. So all the talk of chaos, there's either one or two things are true. Either the press is not giving you good reporting about what it means, or it's really not there at all. It's not chaos. It's change. But I would submit to you, someone who does what Donald Trump does for a living is used to fast-paced change. Drastic, definitive moves that wildly swing and change directions. I would say that he and his children are accustomed to that in the business that they do. And the only constants are themselves. So when I look at Reince Priebus, I never believed personally that Reince Priebus had any long-term role in the administration, regardless of what his title was. He was lukewarm, and he was a friend of the Speaker of the House, who was even less than lukewarm about Donald Trump, and still is not sincere in his support for the current president. Well, why would you make him chief of staff? Because that gets you a better relationship with Paul Ryan, who happens to be the Speaker of the House. Maybe gets you better results with respect to legislation. If you think it was bad with Reince Priebus in the White House, who is a Ryan ally, imagine how much worse it would have been in the House if Reince Priebus had not been there. But after you got to the point where health care was through the House, of what more utility was Reince Priebus? So you bring in Scaramucci. And Scaramucci, I believe, had one specific mission: to get rid of Reince Priebus. That was done. And if you honestly think that Donald Trump did not know who Scaramucci was, how he would behave, or could behave, let's say it that way, how he could behave, then I don't think you're very observant. Scaramucci didn't come in, he came in as communications director. Sean Spicer was really not up to the job. I'll just put that out there, of communications director. So you bring in Steve Scaramucci, who is also not the best communications director, and you wind up elevating Ms. Huckabee. Well, she's married. Huckabee Sanders. And she is de facto. And they bring in another woman, Hope Hicks. Donald Trump doesn't have a problem with this change. Washington, D.C. has a problem with what they perceive as change. Wild and uncontrolled, and they don't know what they're doing. But if he doesn't know what he's doing, please explain to me why the economy is doing better. Please explain to me why jobs are coming back. Please explain to me how we got the Supreme Court nominee through if he doesn't know what he's doing. Fact of the matter is, he actually does know what he's doing. He just does it differently than a career politician. Donald Trump is not as concerned about appearances as you want him to be. For example, how does it look for the President of the United States not to attend the Kennedy Center honors? How does it look for a United States President not to attend the annual Correspondents' Dinner, White House Correspondents' Dinner? Yet Donald Trump basically told both of these, bump that, not interested. Not interested. He didn't go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He's not going to the Kennedy Center honors. Said, don't want to be a distraction, not interested, don't need it. It looks bad. He doesn't care. He didn't become president for optics' sake. He has an agenda. And he is walking through that agenda as best he can in the position that he has, in full view of the American people. Now, of course, there are some who don't like his agenda. That's a given. You could say that about every president. But Donald Trump is relentlessly pursuing what he told the American people he was going to do. And it doesn't look well for the press that didn't like him. It doesn't look good to the pollsters who still have him losing to Hillary Clinton. Doesn't look good to any of them. But as soon as that man says he's going to go someplace and meet with the American people, they line up. They are ready and enthusiastic about doing so. That doesn't strike you as a little bit on the Let's talk about what's going on with the manufacturing councils. So there were 6 defections in 2 days for Trump's manufacturing council in the wake of his comments regarding Charlottesville. Let's remember, because, jeez. let's remember that what Donald Trump said about Charlottesville is accurate and verifiable. And as time goes by, we're finding out things like, well, what's up with the police department that wasn't prepared and didn't take action when skirmishes started between these protesters who had violently disagreed or had violent disagreements with respect to their politics and policy. They don't like each other. They really don't like each other. How do people get maced by non-police if the police are there to keep the peace? Why is it that the governor is being called out by the ACLU for inaction? Why is it that now, in the wake of that, we are finding out just how violent Antifa is? If the president's comments were so inappropriate. No, his comments were accurate. The problem is, in a press, in a media environment, and quite frankly, a political environment dominated by the left, accuracy that doesn't line up with their ideology is simply grounds for criticism. Donald Trump told the truth. What he said was accurate. What he said can be verified. But what he said was not what the left wanted to hear, and they dominate the press. So, I digress. 6 defections in 2 days for Trump's manufacturing council. That's a lot of folks going away, all right? Would make you believe that everything is falling apart. Is it? So what do we see here? The American Manufacturing Council got more defections, 4th, 5th, and 6th in the 2 days following Trump's widely criticized reaction to white nationalist rallies and violence in Virginia. Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, resigned from the council Tuesday, saying it's the right thing for him to do. Richard Trumka, head of the AFL-CIO, and Thea Lee, former AFL-CIO deputy chief of staff, also resigned. Let's be the unions, trade unions in this company, labor unions in this country, are somewhere to the left of Mao Zedong. Did you really think, unless he toed their particular line about diversity and where they stand with the Klan and white nationalists, and of course no one who was to the left of them could possibly be at fault, that they were going to hang up? Really? Come on. That joined the heads of Merck, Under Armour. Under Armour deals with NBA spoiled brats who are also somewhere to the left of Mao Zedong. They deal with black professional athletes. Of course he's not going to hang around Trump. Intel, Silicon Valley, please. This is what you think is important. Oh, by the way, on a few days ago, Trump dissolved the Business Advisory Council as CEOs left that as well. He's getting rid of these people. Or they're excusing themselves. But CNBC published an article that was pretty interesting on the 15th of August. CEO defections don't mean that Trump is losing business support. It reads, 3 CEOs and counting have left President Trump's Manufacturing Council over what some have said they believe is his inadequate or badly delayed response to the racially laden violence in Charlottesville. Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, also said he would drop out of the council. Does this mean Trump has lost CEO and big business support? Does it? Has he lost CEO and big business support? The answer to both questions is no, because neither one of those things ever really existed in the first place, and there's a good chance President Trump wants it that way. What is he saying? This was a setup by Trump against leftists who are in American industry. which definitely describes labor union chiefs. If you're with the nation, then be with the nation. Because when there wasn't a council, even before there was an inauguration, jobs were coming into the country. Pledges of investment, even from foreign nations, were coming into this country without any of these left-leaning individuals being involved with the administration in any way, shape, or form. You really got to understand who Donald Trump is. If you don't, that's okay. But if you do, it really makes things a lot easier. Donald Trump is not concerned about people jumping ship. Donald Trump reads people very well, and he sets people up to do what they are likely to do and to take advantage of that. That's been his MO over the last 2 years. And if you think that these people are smarter than Donald Trump, okay. If you're going to allow the way that Donald Trump speaks to fool you into thinking that he is less intelligent than any of these people, okay. But the economy keeps expanding. And his popularity, despite what the polls say, is actually increasing. For those of you who don't support President Trump, I doubt that you ever will. There's nothing he could ever do to get you to support him. For those who do support Donald Trump, I don't know. Maybe you have the intestinal fortitude to stick this out, because the left is far from through in trying to damage this man and his agenda. But he said he was going to drain the swamp. You're not seeing people jump ship. You're seeing the gators find other homes. And that's our show. God bless you and God keep you as always. Looking forward to being with you next week if the Lord says the same. In the meantime, prayers for you and your family. And by all means, do take care.
Black Man Thinkin with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.